Board. All right, welcome Tamara Kuly and welcome to the Winnipeg School Division Ward 7 Candidates Forum. I would like to acknowledge the land and treaty where we exist here in Ward 7. Out of respect for the Indigenous peoples of Manitoba, we at the Winnipeg School Division recognize the school we attend resides on Treaty 1 land, known as First Nations territory, as well as the homeland of the Red River Métis. My name is Brent Johnson. I'm your moderator for this session. I live in Lansdowne, which is part of Ward 7, and I'm a parent of two children who attend École Lansdowne in Ward 8. I'm also a member of the Lansdowne Parent Council and a board member and secretary of the Luxton Residents Association Board. I approached the Luxton Parent Advisory Council about organizing a candidates forum for Ward 7 because I felt it would be a great way to get to know the two candidates running for election in the ward. And to be clear, there is only one position to be elected, so therefore we will see one candidate elected after the vote closes on October 26th, which is just a few days away this Wednesday. We did have commitments from both Ward 7 candidates, but unfortunately, despite confirming, we've been unable to reach incumbent Arlene Reid for about 6 days now. So we're proceeding with an interview of candidate Tamara Kuly using the format that we had established for the forum. And that format will be 10 questions, 8 of which are provided by People for Public Ed Manitoba, which is a group that's been established to advocate for public funding of education in our province. And 2 of the questions are my own, just to help us get to know the candidate a little better. There will be 2 minutes of response time allotted to each question, and you'll see a timer. Oops. There it is, above my shoulder. And so we'll watch that timer and move on after the clock runs out. We are recording this interview live on Zoom, and it will be posted to YouTube after I get a chance to just clean up the beginning and the end a little bit. And then it will be available for community members to watch from there. All right, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's get to it. So welcome to Tamara Kuly. Thank you for joining me today in the midst of what I know is a very busy campaign period. Let us get to our 10 questions. You will have 2 minutes to answer each. The first one is, please tell us about yourself.
Sure. My name is Tamara Kuly. I live in the ward and actually grew up in the ward. I went to Luxton School myself. My husband and I moved back here in 2006, bought a house, had 2 kids, and our kids have now gone through Luxton. One's out already and one is in grade 6 at Luxton School. So I've lived in the ward almost my entire life, minus about 15 years. I am a consultant now. I worked at MTS, the telephone company MTS, for about 20 years, honing my strategy building and marketing and team building skills there, and decided to leave when Bell was going to buy the company. Didn't want to go through another leadership change, and started consulting because actually my sister-in-law asked for some help with her business, and it turns out that we work really well together. And so I started consulting with her, doing a lot of that strategy building and learning a lot about public engagement from her. So the last 5 years I've spent doing stakeholder informed strategy building for my career. And I've really enjoyed that. And in the last 2 years, become pretty involved with some of the stuff going on with Bill 64 and some of the teacher stuff with schools. So that's kind of my background professionally and to do with schools. I also enjoy sewing, costuming in particular, and have do some work with theater companies just on production assistance, so I can get access to that world a little bit and love doing that work. And also spend a ton of time out hiking and canoeing with my family. So those are the things I enjoy doing in our off times.
Great, thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to question number 2. Tell us why you feel you are a good candidate to be a trustee in Winnipeg School Division's Ward 7.
Well, I've already outlaid, I live here. I have a lot of professional experience in public engagement, which is, I think, is something that's been lacking in the school division over the last number of years. As a PAC former PAC chair and secretary. I've had a lot of time spent inside the machine, if you will, working with the school division, the school, and potentially trustees, and haven't seen a lot of engagement with the community. And especially so during Bill 64. I have family who lives in rural Manitoba, and there was a lot of school trustee activity there and a lot of division activity there. And in Winnipeg, we were really silent from a trustee perspective and from a school division perspective. And that was really disappointing for me because there was a lot at stake. So I stepped into the ring and actually did a lot of public speaking. I do a lot of data analysis in my job. And so I did some of that to explain to people how our votes were being taken away from us by this proposal, spoke at parent groups, spoke at town hall forums. And so really kind of grew my advocacy chops over the last couple of years there. And then again, creating safe spaces in schools for both students and teachers to return to once that was possible, because we wanted our kids back in school, learning in that environment that they love so much. And we wanted all of our teachers and staff to feel safe in doing that. And so I advocated there as well. So my professional experience, along with what I really, really care about in our community, and the fact that I'm a resident and parent in this system is what made me a good candidate.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to question number 3, some of which I think you've answered a little bit. What is your record on advocating for public schools and school funding? And how do you intend to advocate for public schools in your community?
Okay, so as I mentioned, the Bill 64 pieces, a lot of that was advocating for, in specific, not taking away the votes and the local voice within school boards. What had already been taken away is some funding, decision making, and the ability to fund. That was taken away by the provincial government before that happened. So they put a cap on what the school taxes associated to your property were available to increase. So I think the cap is 2%. And so limiting the funding that's available to go into the school division limits the decisions that we can make. Because if we can't make decisions about funding, we can't make decisions about the programs that are offered. So that, along with I have a long history of managing large and building large budgets. I understand the process. I understand the puts and takes, and I understand where we can advocate to the province. And that's really where this lies in terms of an underfunded public education system at this point. If they've removed the ability for the school boards to raise their own funds, they need to back that up with money from the province directly, and they have not done that. In fact, the budget amount that they are funding on a yearly basis in their frame reports, one of their own reports, shows a decrease of almost 9% over the last 5 years, from 2016 until now, which should have been going the other way because they were reducing the ability for the divisions to raise money. So I plan to advocate for that to shift and for them to fully fund public education as it exists now.
Great, thank you. So as you've just mentioned, question number 4 continues along that line. Provincial operational funding for education has not matched the rate of inflation for many years. If this trend continues, how do you intend to respond as a trustee?
The way that we were successful in killing Bill 64 was communicating facts, talking to parents, and explaining the impact of that policy change. And so I intend to use that same process in terms of talking to parents, talking to communities, sharing what is going on, the impacts of things, and including their feedback and their responses and their questions in how we deal with that. The school division has had fairly closed off meetings, a lot of items falling under what's called Rule 44.7, which has been overused. So the goal is to have a lot of those conversations and that sharing and that education really to the public happen, so that the public can then say, no, this is what we want, and we can act on that. That's where the power comes. We have 9 trustees, but we can't move all the mountains, but we can surely invoke parents and teachers and caregivers and our community so that we are better serving education. So that's one tool I plan to use. And the other is to hold accountable the provincial government. We don't need to be quiet. I'm an elected, if I win, I'm an elected official. I have been elected to speak up, and I intend to do so. The idea that we need to be quiet or about the decisions or how this is impacting us or what's on the table for decisions doesn't make any sense. It doesn't allow the public to know what's going on. And we need to do that in order to make sure that our government, provincial government, is held accountable.
Great, thank you. All right, moving on to question number 5. What is your stance on public-private partnerships?
This is tough because we're currently in a spot where public education is underfunded. And I'm not sure we're in a spot with a government who is willing to very, very quickly make changes to fully fund our public education system. So I believe that it should be fully funded. We should have a fully funded public education system that is funded publicly, that is not special interest funded, that doesn't require partnerships with businesses or with philanthropists or with religious organizations to do the work that they need to do. But we are so far away from that point right now. I am willing to contemplate short-term solutions that do not infringe on the direction that the school division needs to go in, that aren't directed donations, but that help schools and individuals succeed. That being said, the threat that's there is that that money is given and then the budget line disappears off of the provincial or school board budget, and we can't let that happen. We need to be able to fully identify all of the pieces that go into running the school division and work towards the provincial government providing that full funding. That is where we need to move to. It's too dangerous to rely on funding that is directed, funding that maybe doesn't align with our values of inclusion, funding that potentially could go away if the benefactor or funder changes their mind. So we need to be able to direct the funding internally through our communities, but I'd be open to those discussions in the short term with a long-term goal absolutely being a fully funded public education system.
Excellent. Thank you, Tamara. All right, moving on to question number 6, more about funding here. What is your stance on school fees?
This is another way to outsource fee funding for schools. So we've always had school fees in terms of I remember going school supply shopping when I was a kid with my parents. That was funded by their household, and I understand the move to school fees to balance that out so that all the kids have the same access to the same supplies. So the move, I understand how that happened, and it's a move towards equity potentially. That being said, the funding probably should still be coming from the province. School fees should be all inclusive. They should be they should be covered by the province. In our school in particular, the school fees go towards classroom supplies, maybe a little bit towards some of the field trips that the class might go to, and that's about it. They don't cover a lot. And those are things that are central to delivering education. So splitting those out and calling those school fees doesn't make any sense to me. And any fee becomes an equity issue as soon as you have tight finances within any family. And that's why it needs to be removed. No one should be held accountable to do something that they can't afford and then have that reflect negatively on them, have them have to go and talk to the principal about that. we should just remove all of those barriers and make sure that all kids are able to, without hesitation, participate fully in school.
Right. Well, continuing on the theme of poverty and equity and access for students, do you have a plan for supporting students and families affected by poverty in the Winnipeg School Division?
Do I have a specific plan? Um, I think we need an equity lens. In fact, I know we need an equity lens. We need to put the funding and programming where it's required and needed the most, to balance the field and allow kids to not have poverty as a barrier to their education. So if that's in food security programs, if that's in other supports that are required in terms of before and after care that needs to happen for free, those kinds of things, lunch program, all of those things, removing the funding needs to go to removing the barriers that are in place for those kids. In terms of overall poverty reduction, schools are the center of our communities now. At least they're the center of my community. It's a hub, and it's an opportunity. There is an opportunity for the province and Canada and the federal government to really make inroads into fighting poverty by using the connections that happen around our local schools and our public schools. So, separate of school run programs, the fact that we are hubs, the fact that teachers know the community, that principals know the community, that EAs know the community, and that they literally are the center of our little community, can be used to help deliver programming that is required at a really safe level in a safe place. So there's the funding pieces, but there's also the delivery pieces that we can be used for, and that partnership can happen. And we have willing participants, I think, in boards and school divisions to allow that to happen.
Excellent, thank you. All right, question number 8. We're getting near the end now. What is your stance on universal nutrition programs, and how could you use your role to facilitate funding for nutrition programs?
So we don't have universal nutrition or food security programs right now in schools. Each school has their own patchwork solution, and most do have some sort of solution. But in the last 2.5 months of talking with parents and parent councils, it's clear that some of that funding is insecure. They're with churches in the neighborhood who have said, here's all the money that we've raised over the years for this, but we're not going to be funding this anymore. They're from private foundations that have annual, budgets that they'll allocate nutrition program funding to, but they won't necessarily continue next year. So much money and time is, or so much time is spent applying for grants to get more funding for these nutrition programs. And in reality, kids just shouldn't be hungry at school. This is a barrier that can be taken away. So many schools have the infrastructure and the processes in place to feed kids at school. So allowing for that to happen at a provincial government budget line level would simplify that. It would take all those hours spent applying for grants and managing those relationships with various partners in the community and the uncertainty that goes along with that, and allow schools to focus on the kids and running education and having that universal nutrition program in there. One of my concerns about a universal nutrition program, though, is the content within. So those kinds of things need to be considered. There are kids with different dietary requirements, but more often it's different types of food that they're used to eating based on their background. And we need to be pretty careful about not moving into an institutional food program, because I think that would be a misstep.
Great, thank you very much. Question 9, how will you prioritize equity for the Winnipeg School Division, or in the Winnipeg School Division?
It is my top priority. And there is an equity audit going on right now within the staffing, so the employment structure of the Winnipeg School Division, making sure that those results come through to the board clearly and as they were intended by the consultants is important. I don't want to see a report that has been massaged by leadership. I want to see the report. And then I want to see a follow-up process that looks at equity in our schools, so that we can understand where we have the gaps, and then we can take that information from these equity audits and go into the community and work with teachers and EAs and other staff at the division in order to solutionize and figure out how to best solve these problems, because there most there's a lot of misrepresentation or underrepresentation at the board level anyway, and in leadership. So we don't have the right complement of folks. We don't have the right diversity within those decision-making structures at this point. What we need to do is make sure that we are forcing the questions, answering the need for those equity audits, and then responding to those, publicly responding to those, saying this is what was heard, this is what we found out. Now we're going into community to validate these things, to help create programs, and to start making change. And the most important part of that process is to report on metrics for those changes. I want to see annual report on how we're changing that coming from leadership.
Excellent. Thank you for your answer. All right. Very last question. How is your campaign being funded?
I've answered this 14 times and I will do it happily again. Through very generous donations within our community. So individuals, all within Winnipeg, except I have family who lives in Boulder and Lockport. So a couple of within Manitoba, but slightly outside of Winnipeg. And then our own family. And the biggest contributor actually is the provincial government, because we took our our education property tax credit rebate and we put it directly into the campaign, and that was about $680. So they are technically the largest contributor to our campaign, but about 70% of our campaign has now been funded through individuals in the community, and the rest is coming from our pocket.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I suspect in the near future there might be more discussion on the topic of that property tax education rebate, but we'll have to leave that for another discussion on the other side of this election.
That's right.
You know, I'll be happy to chat more about that topic.
That's
Thank
right.
you so much, Tamara, for participating today. It's been a real pleasure to hear from you and about your stance on these questions. I want to thank the parents, caregivers, and community members for watching. And I want to thank everyone who's participating in this election in any manner, you know, by running as a candidate, certainly is a big commitment, by volunteering, supporting, by building awareness, or engaging in any way, even just by going and reading some newspaper articles or seeking out a candidate's information on their website. You know, it's really important that we have a healthy, thriving democracy, and that comes almost exclusively through engagement and participation. So go vote on Wednesday, please. I believe the polls open at 8 o'clock in the morning and close at 8 p.m. And you can find information on where to vote on the City of Winnipeg website if you don't already know. Or if you didn't get your voter information card, you can still vote without it. Don't let that be a barrier. And we'll look forward to seeing the results sometime late Wednesday evening. Thanks
for
again,
pulling this
Tamara.
together, Brent. Thank you for pulling this together. I know it's a lot of work, so I appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, and we'll see you on the other side.
Okay, thank you.